So, welcome to our board meeting in public. Just for the point of order, this is a board meeting in public, not a public meeting. We do now record our meetings, or our board meetings, so that others in the public can see it. And I'm just checking that is there anybody else who would be proposing to record or video the proceedings. So I'll take that as a no. Okay. Information. Sorry. So yeah, Iram. So actually, everybody knows Iram, but this is Iram that's really taking the lead today. So Iram, apologies first of all, please. Okay, so just Kate. You might need to speak a bit louder.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, apologies I've received from Kate Page.
Lovely. And then any interest to declare?
So I've got the conflicts on item 8,
Okay.
which is the board arrangements for 2020-21. And at this point, Paul Smith will chair the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then just for public note is that the links of all our registers of interest are actually held on our website under the Managing Conflict of Interest part of the section. Okay, so we go straight to the minutes of the last meeting that was held on the 28th of November in Herts Council. So first of all, just for accuracy, pages 1 and 2.
Yeah, Nicholas, could I don't know if this is on, is it?
Yeah.
It is? Just to say that, apologies, we didn't put Elka into members present. Elka is a member rather than just in attendance, so apologies for that.
Okay, so that's pages 1 and 2, pages 3 and 4. Page 5. Okay, any matters arising? So straight over to the action tracker. So we have several that are still open. So if you just work our way down, the first one was the proposal for the development of integrated care partnerships, and that is obviously being discussed today. Then the Better Care Fund plan. Fine, so that, yeah, sorry Dave, you might need to use the mic, yeah, okay. Next one was the staff survey action plan. So that is, has that now been publicly released, or still, yeah, the staff survey action plan? Yes.
You mean the recent?
Yes, sorry.
That item refers to last year, sorry.
Okay, that is last year,
Refers to
sorry, I
last
missed
year's,
that.
yeah.
Okay, the bath, we obviously have a section on that today.
That's quite a long-term piece of work, so it's not actually due yet.
Fine, okay. And then the health and safety strategy and policy, which that's due in March. Lovely, okay. Okay, so now over to questions that we received from the public before the board meeting.
Sure. I'm totally failing to get this microphone to work. Trevor knows how to do it. We did have...
Just press the button.
I did. It stayed red. I just don't have the touch. Couldn't even get the camera on either. We did have a question from a member of the public, but it doesn't relate to an agenda item, which is our policy. But just to say that it was a query regarding Nascot Lawn and whether the board understands that we are unable to quantify savings from that programme of work. And we are responding to that in writing, and of course we'll copy the board in on that information.
Okay, so that will be, has that response actually gone out yet?
It hasn't gone out yet.
No. Okay, fine, but it will do, and the board will be availed of the response. And obviously we'll come back if there's any queries. Okay, any other questions received? Okay, so at this point, I move on to item 6. And so a warm welcome to David, who has now been appointed as interim chief exec. So David, over to you.
Thank you, Nicholas. This is my first AO report as Chief Executive of Cross Valley CCG. I'm going to run through various programs of work and update the board on areas in in which we feel that we have made significant progress. Some of these areas are already on board papers today, so we have the Integrated Care Partnership and Integrated Care System, which I won't talk in detail through this report, but we'll have a conversation at the agenda item when it comes up. Alongside board membership, which is also changing, but that will be a separate agenda item. So if we move on to operational areas, and I'd like to start off with children, young people and maternity, where I think that we are making significant progress in the work that we're doing across the county, across our SDP area, and we've resubmitted and supported and refreshed our long-term transformation plan for children, young people and CAM services. And as everyone knows, we are a trailblazer in that space and lots of work has been progressing. And so we'll be focusing on areas in the long-term plan around children's support, around children, young people with autism and ADHD. And we have to get a plan together, and we talked yesterday at Emotional Health and Wellbeing Board with partners around the table about how we would begin to start integrating the neurodevelopmental pathways and how we'd start improving some of those opportunities for families and children to get diagnosed quickly, but also to have lots of support up front when they come into challenging times as a family, rather than the lengthy processes that we have in place. So there's a system redesign across the neurodevelopmental pathways coming forward, and you'll see that progress abroad within the next year. There was also a children looked after review, and we do have health responsibilities for children looked after across the system and for the population in the Parts Valleys. And some of those outcomes of the review, which was nationally led team and work that we did internally, suggest that we have recommendations that we need to improve on. And some of the themes, as you can see, are pulled out in the report around outcomes framework, commissioning plans, assessment care planning, workforce, residential and fostering. There are areas that we know that we can improve on, and we'll be setting up task and finish groups to continue that work in partnership with the County Council and Eastern North Herts Trust. And what that will do is support some of the, I guess, most vulnerable children in our system to ensure that they have the appropriate health checks, they get appropriate mental health support, and that their placements and their journey into adulthood can be as successful as possible. And I think we have a significant contribution that we need to make into that space. CAMS, as you all know, a significant challenge over the last year. We were hitting referral to treatment times of around 33% earlier in the year. And that was for children, as you just described, but also around adults as well. The work that we've done over the last year in terms of action plan and bringing performance back up means that from the CAMS perspective, we are now hitting 94% of treatment time. So significant improvements in our ability to ensure that people and young people achieve the care that they need as quickly as possible with their mental health conditions. What we're now doing is looking at system redesign in that space to how we re-architect the pathways, looking at single points of access from universal services through to specialists. And previously, your only universal single point of access would have been for specialist CAMS. So I think we've got a plan that we're going to be initiating in the coming year, and that alongside the neurodevelopmental plan is one of our two key areas we think that we need to focus on for children and young people. So continue the update. The West Herts Delivery Board continues to make progress. Our local delivery plans are in action. A memorandum of understanding went out. And previously, this initially was developed pre-primary care networks. We now have included primary care networks in those memorandums of understanding, and what that will do is enable to knit the system together. It's gone out to all of the partners, and we were hoping to achieve sign-off by the 27th, and I'm just waiting for the team to compile all the signatures and see where we are, because we've got to. Lots of challenging discussions in that space about where PCNs have a contribution in terms of strategic development as well as delivery platforms. I think we've got to a position now where we have most of the PCNs on board and wrapping them into our current transformation plans in regards to the Integrated Care Partnership will be the next step, so that we ensure they've got a voice at the table in delivering that. We've also gone out to recruit PMO roles to support the development of those plans and each of the localities. Staff are now in place, and each of those staff will be there to support and administrate and help localities in delivering the next steps of their transformation. Just an update, continuing in that space, our social prescribers link work grant has gone out. Its closing date is around 7th of February, and this was to look at the gaps that were occurring in service provision where link workers and social prescribers were not able to make referrals to support some of the care that was needed. And what we did was offer £20,000 per primary care network to be able to invest in innovation locally, invest in voluntary and community sectors to find and kind of work up new ways to support individuals who would have come to GP practices and be able to access care that isn't necessarily healthcare but does benefit the health outcomes of the individual. So that's the process that's in place at the moment, and we will be seeing the bids closing from the 7th of February and running a process about how we decide to distribute those fundings. To date, we have 10 primary care network link workers in post. They've been recruited too, which is fantastic news. I think we're nationally leading in that space, and we are still continuing to recruit the others. So in a really positive place in terms of our community engagement, and PCNs are seeing the value of those. We know that there is currently some anxiety around the local national DES and what that might mean for this, but as a CCG we have mitigation plans to ensure that things of this nature continue to be of availability even if there is issues around signing up that contract. So just to give assurance that this is part of our plans and mitigation process. Okay, so you will see an update on primary care networks, and I'll just describe those. Feedback has happened regarding the DES. We've fed back nationally our concerns around it, and we've collated a response. That's gone back to the centre, and we'll be receiving feedback. We think that they will review nationally all of the feedback that's received, and it's been quite a lot. And then we will be able to support what the next steps and plans will be to go forward in terms of that part of the process. Some good news around extended access. Direct booking of GP appointments into 111 and into extended access is live. So we know that that's going to be an enhancement to the current service and will improve patient outcomes and patient experience. All locality federations now provided extended access appointments which are protected from the age group of 0 to 4. Again, another significant offer within our children's services, and it's quite nice to see that the groundswell of work that we put behind children's agenda is starting to come to fruition, and that feels like it's more front-facing in our CCG than it's ever been before. So I think that's some really positive plans going forward. Supporting winter plans, that commenced on the 1st of October, an additional capacity to core hours, and we can see the numbers are quite clear in terms of additional appointments, and 28% have been delivered as a blended workforce, which again is a new way of thinking for our frontline practitioners and for patients to receive the care that they need. I will also update on planned care, so cancer early diagnosis, and we're working across the STP on this. We know that this is an integrated care system opportunity to commission in a different way. We mentioned ensure that we have quicker access to diagnostics, streamlined pathways and education of staff. Talking to a few PCN clinical directors, they want to focus on cancer as well. They think they can make a really direct impact, especially on early diagnosis, and that feels like, from conversations I'm having, is a real opportunity to have a kind of a macro plan that ensures the commission is consistent, but also a real focus on delivery and education and information for patients at a local level, and the benefit there I think will be significant. And in March we commissioned a 6-month pilot for direct access to head MRI and CT and abdomen scans, if people are aware of that, and that is progressing in a positive way forward. CRCH, Central London Community Healthcare Services, are now moving from mobilisation to transformation. We have seen significant improvements in their performance over the last period of time, and given that they had to move, as you can see in the paper, a significant amount of staff and a significant amount of buildings that they needed to reconfigure and move into their new model, we feel that they are now in the space that we will start to see some of those improvements. So key aspects of this transformation have been an operating of the 8 till 6 p.m. 7 days a week. The enhanced service will provide a single point of access as well. We have multidisciplinary teams with geriatrician and GP input aligned within primary care networks. and weekly frailty clinics will be beginning in March. So these are all of the things that we wanted to improve on what we were previously getting from our community provider and move into a space of transformation. Discharge to assess pathways are being negotiated continually and integrated with Herts County Council, and they are re-procuring their home care model in the next few months, and we're ensuring that our discharge to assess is compliant. We make best use of the resource that we have. We're not running two parallel processes that actually don't give value to the system. We'll also be doing a review of the community bed model across the 81 rehabilitation and 16 stroke neuro beds, and how we then start to plan forward on our bed base, and we're bringing that to board in the next few months as well. Frailty and end of life. We know that we have plans around the hospices who have moved into those contract with CRCH. That's really improved some of the communication and improved some of the outcomes, and there is a business case that we'll be discussing in the future about how we might streamline that care. So I think from a CRCH point of view, we really have got into the space now of transformation, thinking differently, and challenging the provider to work at pace to ensure that we get the delivery that we need. Another area that the board needs to be aware of is the redevelopment of West Herts Hospital Trust. So members will remember that in autumn 29, we are sponsor to the SOC into this national team around July time, and the government fed back to us confirming that some 400 million was available for the redevelopment of that site. We had a visit from David Williams, the Department of Health's Director of Finance, who came to visit and disclosed that that money was available and available for us to use, but the new models of drawdown have changed, and therefore we need to work within a new system. So we previously had a strategic outline case, outline business case, and final business case. We've now moved to a position where we need to restructure through what's the health infrastructure program, and that will support our plans going forward. We remain still in a JR process. The stay will be lifted, and we will be going into that process over the next month in terms of setting a date for when we will be at the High Court to have a hearing in that respect. So we will update the board continually in that space. Urgent treatments, so we've big focus on urgent treatment centres. We've begun to work closely with Greenbrook Healthcare, who will be running the urgent treatment centre at the front of Watford General. Engagement with both Greenbrook and West Herts continues to be positive. We are ready to launch on the 1st of April. We're making sure that everything is compliant and in place so that we can get the best benefit of that. I think that will be a significant impact on the work that we've done locally, and improve patient experience and improve the performance of the trust in that space. And a really innovative and interesting way in which the trust will learn to enter a leadership space in terms of how they manage contracts on behalf of the system. Other areas are effective resource management. So we're now moving into enhanced effective resource management. So previously, lots of our resource work with primary care was around looking at referrals, where referrals were going, and managing pressures in different parts of pathways. We used to do that independently with GPs and primary care within localities. Given the movement we've got in terms of the integrated care partnership, we're now bringing all secondary care partners, community partners around the table to support that conversation. So we will now have enhanced effective resource management meetings that will bring the collective together, and the first beginnings of what I think will be partnership working and collaboration across the ICP alongside our transformation plans. In terms of HR and organisational development, the staff survey was launched on the 7th of October and closed on the 29th. Our response rate was 89.7%, an increase year on year that we've had, which is, I think, fantastic, and higher than average response rate than other CCG surveys as well. So we will now be looking and reviewing the outcomes of that survey, and we'll feed that back to board. Appraisals, launched the e-appraisal system on ESI in November, and saw 99% return rate, which again is fantastic. So it means we're managing and supporting our staff well. We're having productive and supportive conversations in their own career development and the best out of our staff. So I think that's a really positive and probably a well done to all of our managers in that system, because I know the appraisal system wasn't an easy one at the start to pick up, but it's now really embedded in CCG. And SLT development programme was launched in October, really positive again take up from our staff and training and development team. Some other areas just before I close is apprenticeships. Now has 7 members of staff on the apprenticeship programmes across the organisation, with a further 1 to commence shortly. The Government Department of Education states 2.5% of organisations' workforce should undertake apprenticeships by 2021. And we've already got a figure that exceeds that, 3.10%. So again, I know that we've pushed for this, and I know board members have pushed for this as well, so we are in the right space. We're currently preparing our annual workforce and equality data report to comply with data publication requirements, and we will report that back in the March meeting. And as part of our CCG's commitment to Time to Change pledge, 10 employees will receive mental health first aid training. We know the CCG and working in various elements of our business is always challenging, but we need to support our staff, and I think that's a real positive cultural change for us that will put us into the right place going forward. So, thank you for taking the questions.
Okay, thank you, David. I think it was Stuart, then Rami, then Asif.
Okay, a couple of questions. If you're pressing the button. Okay, is there?
Slowly.
Right, thank you. A couple of questions. First of all, I'm delighted to see the number of apprenticeships we've got and the number going up, and something that I've focused on for a while, as you know. Can I just, on the Enhanced Effective Resource Management section, page 20, that first paragraph, perhaps translate it for somebody like me in terms of how it's actually working. You know, type 1, what is type 1, what is type 3, and explain how that's becoming as effective as it is. And just while I've got the microphone on, with the UTC going to become operational in April, I'd really like to have a site visit there sometime, because having had the experience there, I'd really like to understand how it's really going to work on the ground, you know, what the plan is, what the space is, and how that is going to be managed. So maybe wait until it's up and running, but I think that's something that I'd like to have diarised for me in the future.
So the type 1 and type 2 is a bit of an NHS technical response. So what we do is we code individuals who come into the hospital with varying presentations, and what they do is they get coded as a type, and that type is either someone who then is urgent and emergency, that will go through the 4-hour process, or someone who's not urgent and is able to be deferred and moved somewhere else. So it's the level of complexity of the individual that comes in. So what we can do, Stuart, is provide you with more detail on that information so that you can break down the types of people that are coming in.
I'd just like to understand
the
process a little bit, that's all.
That's fine. It's just a delineation between the individual's presentations on those types. So a UTC would see a certain individual, and then A&E would see another certain individual.
Okay.
So yeah, type 1s are the more severe end of the spectrum, so the classic A&E type presentations. Type 3s are the sort of people who also would be seen in an urgent treatment centre. So the movement of less people going to the acute end and more being seen in a lower acuity is a good thing, because you're not using the sort of the full A&E resources on people who don't require it.
Okay. Rami, thank you.
Can I just support you with the... Is this working now?
Slowly.
Is it now? Yeah. Support you with the CAMS work, because the CAMS work is not only looking at changing pathways moving forward, but there's been quite a lot of work on dealing with the backlog. And we saw yesterday at the CAMS board meeting that has been achieved quite substantially, and much more so in the West Herts patch than the North and East Herts patch, which is a real accolade to the focus that we've been giving. In terms of the question about one-on-one being booked, I would just like some clarification whether that applies to all 4 localities or whether it's just in one locality. And the third issue with regards to cancer, it is really good that we're starting to focus, but I think we need to just have some more clarification at how we move from mitigation to achievement of KPIs, because in recent years, I've taken over recently, a lot of the feedback has been why we couldn't achieve. What I'd really like to know is why we can, and a lot of the can is because there are multiple trusts involved in the care pathway, so we need to actually work in a much more collaborative way with all the trusts, and for that we need some CCG support.
So in terms of the cancer, I completely agree with you. I think what we've been doing is mitigation plans on performance historically, and now we have a forward plan that will link the depth of the ICS support, which comes down essentially alongside our ability to contract manage and support our providers who are delivering outside of naturally our patch. That is one of our next steps that we're going to move into, ramming and put that focus in. The fact that we've got the PCNs involved as well will really support that for us.
And I think, to be honest, the formation of the ICP will help that as well, because all the providers will be working together to provide a service, so I think that should help.
And in terms of 111, that is across all localities and can access. Michelle, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yes, so
Everyone can go on at a time, so everyone has to switch off.
So the NHS 111 direct booking functionality is available directly into GP practices at the moment, and we're just drafting communication or guide to practices around how that's going to work and which practices would be willing to utilise that functionality. With regards to the extended access, there's been a national issue regarding the IT functionality for over 18 months now, and we've been working with NHS Digital and NHS England Improvement to get that IT functionality up and running. But what we have done is identified a workaround solution with NHS 111 that actually is live and working and has been for some time in the Decorum Extended Access Service. We were, and St Albans I think is just about to start. We had delayed implementing it in Herts and Watford because we were expecting the national solution to be live by now, but because of the upgrade required at the HUC 111 clinical system, we haven't been given a date of when that's going to happen. So the actual true IT functionality for the direct booking is still not there, but there is an interim workaround solution that will be live across all four.
Okay, I think it was Azzy then, or Trevor, did you have something to come back to?
No, not on that.
No.
Thank you. My question was about the PCNs. We know how CCG helped on-prime the PCN creations, and as you said, we are ahead of the game in many areas, including link workers, clinical pharmacists. However, there is some anxiety now in PCNs about this and whether it will be changed to a degree where they would continue functioning as they are. There's a worry about PCN feeling that they are exposed to the risk they're taking in employing extra staff where the funding would come directly from NHS England. What assurance we can give to PCNs at this stage where we would be thinking about even employing new staff like first contact physiotherapists, that they do not lag behind in national picture?
So that's a really good question, Asif, and it's one that we need to kind of discuss. So we met with Anne Radmore, our regional director, on Tuesday morning, and her view was that this has made significant noise nationally, and they are going to have to go back to the drawing board and look at what that response is to the desk, because this is something that's not just local to us, but much wider. So her view was that there will be a time period where they have to review and reflect and then come back. From the CCG perspective, we're committed to supporting the people that we have in place currently, because that shouldn't be at risk, and that was part of our local transformation plans. In terms of new posts that will be funded nationally and the risk there, we probably need to have a conversation with each of those PCNs and maybe a wider conversation with everyone collectively about how we can keep mobilising, because it is the right thing to do, and how we can best use the resources that we've got. So I think our clarity of answer to support what's already in place is there, so we will do that and commit to that. But the longer plan, we need to make sure aligns with what we will get back and actually support that. Hopefully that gives some assurance.
Okay, yeah, Karina and Trevor, quickly, just on that point, if it is, yeah.
Yes, it is on the one with PCN. I think the anxiety and the unrest is everywhere in the PCNs. And, you know, because there was the conversation with Anne who actually talked about it's not going to work, we have to scrape it all off and start again. I don't know if she meant PCNs or just the desk or any of that. But I think what I believe is that it is our role as clinical leaders who understand more and have more knowledge and more oversight to actually reassure the PCN and to explain that there is no magic solution and there is no clarity coming from above, and to reassure and ask them to simply be patient and wait with us and not give up. I think that's our role.
Yeah, so I think Rami just wanted to come back, and I'll come back to you as if, yeah.
Can I just put the email that came from the CCG saying hold fire, we are with you, we are supporting you, we are working with you is the way forward. I think there is so much anxiety, there is obviously on one end a lot of emotion, on the other hand, and there is a bit of thinking and understanding. I think what we need to do is, what I would suggest we do as a CCG is go out there and say we are with you, we understand the pressures, we are not just pushing more work your way, and we will try our utmost to mitigate this work. So if we're talking about frailties, we're talking about homes, we can get some ENPs in on a on a CCG wide. We will work with you to try and mitigate this when it eventually comes so that people stay engaged. What we don't want is a collection of CDs throwing the towel in and then us having to rebuild what has been built so well.
But we are the CCG. Rami, we are supposed to do that.
Yeah, okay. As if Elizabeth, briefly, because I just want to come back to, I think you've got a point on.
I think that what Rami said is exactly what I wanted. We have been at the forefront, although it is a national list, but CCG have led the PCNs here. And if we now do not continue being the lead and fill the gaps, people will fill the gap and worry. That is the sort of main point. Thank you.
Elizabeth?
The points being raised by Rami and also actually we made with the conversation we had with the NFC yesterday. And I think the strategy now is to get out there on the coal face, having discussions with the PCS, so we don't have gaps being filled in the vacuum of information. There's information, but we just need to keep giving that information. I'm glad Rami mentioned the letter that was sent out, because I do think that gives some reassurance, but we just need to do a lot more.
I think just one very brief point, which is that we had intended to run a clinical leadership, particularly focused on clinical directors, and the intention had been to do that in early February. Unfortunately, because this obviously needs to involve other stakeholders, including West Herts Hospital Trust, they weren't able to make the dates that have been identified, and we're now in danger of that going into March, April, which I think is too long in the future, and we're going back to see what we can sort out there. But it's just a quick update as to why it hasn't happened, and we will get an email out just to explain the difficulties of the clinical directors, but it's really important. Okay, fine. Thelma, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on from PCNs. Looking at the frailty section reminded me, and reference to CLCH, reminded me of the many hours that we spent. And I wondered, and if not, I think it would be helpful to have in your reports, say 6 months on, how they are performing and whether there are still areas of concerns. And also, I would like to know a reflection on all the outstanding things at the time we transferred, whether they've all been dealt with by the please. So I think 6 months would be a better time, say around April and May.
I think that's a really good point, and I think that will.
Turn off.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. I think what we'll do is we'll bring back a full paper and do a full board report on what was, what is, what's changed, and what's still concerning, and we'll put that into one document, bring that back, and add that to the board paper maybe in the next session in March.
Okay. Sorry, I've got 2 more questions. HR. staff survey, I think given the changes that's going on and the level of uncertainty, I think it would be very helpful to bring back the findings, because there's no reference here to it coming to board, so that we know what's going on and then see if there's any support or additional that as a board we can give on that.
I think we'd have right to say it.
Oh, sorry.
We're having fun with this, aren't we? So yeah, the staff survey, which the embargo is lifted in a couple of weeks' time, the 18th of February. Well done. And yeah, we will absolutely bring the findings here. What happens usually, and I think it works pretty well, it comes here. We also have a detailed conversation at exec, and it also goes to our staff involvement group who are really on it. You know, they've worked really hard with Louise and the team in developing actions over last year's. So yeah, absolutely, that'll be a really important part of what we do over the next few weeks.
Okay. Sorry, I've got two more questions, both HR, but they're very short, I promise you. In terms of leadership, it talks about the senior leadership team, again, relating to changes that's going on in the whole system, and the concept of growing your own. What about the people below that senior? Is there any program to help them develop up to the next stage? So as SLT are moving on, the people below moving. And my final question, so that's the end. Again, because of all the changes that's going on, and certainly desire of certainly our lay members to make a value-added contribution to the whole integration system. Is there anything that HR is thinking of, or how does it work in terms of members? There's NHSCC is having their conference on the 7th for lay members. I'm attending that, and I think Alison might be attending as well. Paul and Stuart were not able to attend. Sorry, that's me. I'll just speak.
So yes, in answer to your question, is there anything for low? Yes. So we started off with an approach where we did 360-degree appraisals for the board, and we did 360-degree appraisals for 7+ staff, and that informed development programs. There's a new development program which will be coming to you shortly for board development. We have enacted the development program for the senior leadership team, and we're currently developing a development program for the level below. So those are the in-house offers. In addition to that, there are a wide range of offers that are available through the Leadership Academy. And so we have a really good rate of application and uptake in terms of some of the standard programmes, and then there are also some targeted programmes as well, particularly for BAME staff. And we know that the applications have just closed off for this cohort, so we should have some further information about the number of people who've been successfully selected to undertake those business programmes.
I suppose I'd just add to Thelma, I think this is such an important point that you raised, and I think that we are all faced as a system in terms of actually developing the skill set that will allow us to make really wise decisions in terms of patient pathways and whatever in the future. So I think that is something that we'll hear increasingly about and really be very proactive in our own ICP, and I'm sure we'll approach into that discussion later. Thank you. Paul was next in turn.
Two observations, I think, rather than questions, so it should be quick. On the small grants process, I'd really encourage you to make sure that there's, although there are only small amounts of money, to make sure that the conflicts of interest process around that is really robust, particularly because it involves other partners who are perhaps not as sensitive to it as we are. So I think you really want to make sure that you've got a good audit trail on that one. On the health infrastructure programme, sort of good that we're part of this bigger programme, but there's always a risk with that you then start to move at the pace of the very slowest member of the programme, or even that if you fall to becoming the slowest, that you might actually lose out on money, because sometimes governments change their minds and money gets taken away and things. So we really need to make sure that we're working with West Herts to stay up front, and we don't get derailed by the judicial review or anything like that, and that we keep our snout firmly in the trough on that one.
I think that's the really good points that you've made. I think, especially given that we're now devolving decision making from the CCG into potentially in the future prime care networks, localities, and how we do the integrated care partnership, conflicts of interest, how money is managed, is probably more important than it's ever been, because actually decisions being made local will affect the decisions that a CCG that will be pan STP will be feel so distant from. We need to make sure that we're legally compliant. So I really note that point, Paul. In terms of the health infrastructure plans, well, we are continually to push, and in fact, if anything, our challenge as a CCG is to make sure that we get the best offer and a much rational offer on the table as quickly as possible. So Juliet is leading some of the work with the Trust alongside myself in this space. We know that there is the health infrastructure plans are new in terms of the process. It's not clear what that process is, but we're also getting counter messages that suggest you tell us when you need to come to us and get that drawdown of funding. So we're in a bit of an ambiguous place in terms of the national kind of process, but what we're trying to do is keep on top of it. So I have regular weekly calls with Nigel Littlewood at the Department of Health, who is the lead for estates, and we're making sure that we're as close as possible. Julia, I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
Maybe just say something about the speed. So your concern was to make sure that we don't actually, that we're not kind of slowed down. I think one of the things which is coming through loud and clear from DH is pace. The government really wants to see all of the hospital programmes that were announced back in the autumn actually progress, because it's seen as a big government commitment, and also to make sure that there are new buildings clearly established over the next 5 years. So I think that we are being pushed in terms of pace really quite hard by regulators and government.
And if there's anything informally that needs going back to David Williams, I've worked with him at the MOD, so we grilled him when he was acting finance director on the audit committee, so we got on quite well. So if there's anything I can help on, then just let me know if there are issues that we want to get in sort of through the summit.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Rami? Yeah.
Come on. Yeah, can I just question also, as we're moving towards ICS and ICPs, what they affect? Because we've got another hospital that needs development within the SDP at Princess Alexandra. Are there any pressures from that end that may affect our development? And if so, have we provided enough mitigation and timelines to make sure that we get our development taking place and it doesn't get derailed from that?
So my take on this, Randy, is that there are two competing hospitals. The pressures will not be that we don't get our allocation and do our work. The pressure that we will have will be about consistency of allocation of funds to both hospitals and what that would mean if they were to invest differently in PAH to West Herts Hospital Trust. I think that is the challenge. Our money is ring-fenced, our money will be available as long as our plans are current, but actually the conversation with PAH still hasn't landed in the space that says this is the investment that you will get and this is the type of hospital that you need, and I think they're the challenges. I have a meeting on Monday with NHS England who are talking to Princess Alexandra Hospital to ensure that I hear everything that goes on in that space and that I can mitigate any of the issues that might arise as you described. But I don't think it's a problem about us getting the money, it's more a problem about consistency for our population about what the final offer might be at PAH.
Okay. Yeah, Jill. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Jill and Trevor, sorry.
Can I just say it is very much on the public agenda, and I think that keeping the public updated about this is something that there is still a demand for. That it is going to come out of public meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. We're really, really conscious of that. We know that the next stage will need quite a bit of engagement. We can't start that yet because we're still kind of waiting for some further information, but we're really, really clear that information needs to go out. We're also, excuse me, because of the judicial review and the pause, the stay has now been lifted, so actually we can progress things now. But I mean, absolutely, we're very, very much aware that it's still very live in the public's mind. What we don't want to do is go through a long period of silence, and that absolutely is not our intention.
Thelma, were you trying to come back on that, or was it? No. Okay. Trevor, sorry.
Yeah, so I mean that came across last night. We were meeting with Decorum, and they're certainly looking for more information. So I think that's a really important point. Just three quick things. One, just going back to PCN's brief. I mean, one of the main PCN issues is that obviously workforce concerns, because obviously recruiting in general practice at the moment is quite difficult, and also all the the other. The blended workforce is also not easy to find. The paramedics, nurses, they're scarce for everyone. So one of the problems is workforce. And I suppose just emphasising that there is a CCG and ASTP workforce plan which tries to address all this, and we hope that will also help to assure the PCNs that we are supporting them. So that's the first bit. Secondly, just the CAMS, the work on, we focus on young people in CAMS. I think that we are very much welcomed by general practice, because that's an area that we find quite a lot of difficulty in. And then finally, just I think going almost back to Stuart's point really, is in terms of the urgent treatment centre, obviously we have a supplier in Greenbrook. We're working well with them. And I suppose my just nagging doubt is in terms of past performance is the estates and the IT infrastructure at Watford, and whether we have assurance on that.
Sharon, I think there's two really excellent points there. The first one, I think, is in terms of workforce. I wouldn't say that I would say that I'm sufficiently assured that the workforce at an SDP level has really fully embraced the issue about the enhanced workforce in primary care that will need to deliver all of the things that are going to be expected of primary care networks. So I think that's a pushback we should certainly make. So maybe that's just a point for noting. And I think the other point, which was about the digitisation, if you like, and the capability of West Herts. This is clearly going to be, as we heard from Anne Radmore on Tuesday, a really important part of the development of West Herts, and will be, they will be held to account to make sure we will, as a system, be held to account to make sure that the interoperability and the digitalisation is at a level which puts them, that a new hospital is about everything, including the digital enabling. Yeah.
I was particularly sort of thinking about the urgent treatment centre, which hopefully will be going live in 2 months. I think, obviously the long-term plan, I agree, but actually the short-term plan on that, I think, is probably more than risk. Okay. Rami, finally, and then I'm going to move on. Yeah.
Exactly the same point. I think we need assurance for the 1st of April. I think we've had a fantastic reputational boost with CLCH. I think we need to maintain that reputational boost by making sure that we're there. Greenbrook are giving us some ideas based on their experiences at other sites. I think the West Herts site, from our personal experience, is different.
So can I can suggest, I think there's a very strong thrust here from the board in terms of seeking assurance, and maybe we can go back to Trudy and the team to really make sure that we have, re-examined all the capabilities and the possible risks.
And estates as well. So make sure the estates are in place prior to the
I think that's really important points that you've made. Okay, if that's okay, I'm actually going to move on. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to David. I'm now going over to item 7, which is the BAF, which we're being asked to approve. I think, Rod, are you going to introduce this item? Yeah. Yeah. So over to Rod, I'll take it as read. Yeah.
Thank you. Just a couple of updates. The Exec have reviewed the board assurance framework with a proposal that one particular Res 2.2a, which is the one around quality and safe services. We're proposing we reduce that score from 12 to 8. You may recall back in November, the board also approved the reduction in the score of the financial balance risk to 8. So things are moving in the right direction. I just wanted to mention on risk 2.6, which is around data privacy, that we are I guess upping the focus on cyber security and awareness, because most of the issues around cyber security are due to human error. So we're embarking on a programme of providing greater awareness and training for staff. Exec went through a 2-hour training session earlier this month, and Nicholas was there as well. And we're aiming to do some training at the next board development meeting. So that's it on the BAF. Just one change on the corporate risk register, which is the one around the no deal EU exit, which we're recommending is closed. And we'll all sing Old Lang Syne later, if that's all right with you. Happy to take any comments or questions.
Yeah, Paul.
So I wouldn't close the no deal one yet, actually, because it's not done until it's done, and other areas I have been are keeping it, recognising that there still could be things happening sort of later on in the year, depending on where final trade deals settle up and things. So I think we need to keep sight of it. Actually, the other thing I think which we probably topically need to dust off is our pandemic risk, which we haven't had on the register since bird flu, I don't think. But given the excess of Mexican beer floating around at the moment, then I think we probably need to look at that. Corona.
Only you. Really? Diane? Paul?
Just to confirm, we still have the flu on our nursing and quality risk register, so it isn't escalated to BAF level.
Okay, it might need to be dusted off to make sure that it's ready.
So we take the nursing and quality risk register to the quality committee, so we can raise that next week as part of the discussion on risk register.
Yep, Ron?
Just to pick up on Paul's comment about the no deal exit, I do agree. We need to keep our focus on that. I think maybe the risk needs to be reworded. I think there is a risk still there. I guess the key point is that nationally we're not getting the daily sit rep updates, we're not getting the weekly telephone conferences. So nationally there is a view that in terms of healthcare we're okay. I'm not saying we're going to be forever, but we do need to keep an eye on that.
Sorry, can I just add to that one? So, surely the changes in or the proposals from the government in terms of workforce and eligibility and the Australian point system means we need to really be thinking about the workforce and how that poses a risk. So, in a sense, some of those risks that Paul quite rightly identifies probably belong in some of the other parts of our BAF register. Stunned you into silence. Okay. Okay. So any other points? Sorry, from the board, or so we're being asked to approve that. So do I have approval? Yeah. Thank you. We'll now go over to the next item, which is the item 8, which I'm now going to step down from chairing because I am directly conflicted, and ask Paul to chair this item.
Good, thank you for that. So there's three recommendations in here, and in fact, although the first one says approve the GP membership, I think it's to note the GP membership because the members have decided that. So although obviously the GPs around the table and the lay members have an interest in the first two parts of the recommendation, it's not a decision that they're being asked to make here. So I think we're okay to note that and just move on there. So the first 2 points are, and I'll take the paper as read, of course, is to note the GP membership for 2021 and the lay membership for 2021, which is to continue with the existing board structure, recognising that the upcoming changes in 12 months' time. And if colleagues have no questions on that, if we move on to item 3, which is to approve the arrangements for the chair, the deputy chair and the deputy clinical chair. And I believe that Nicholas has amazingly agreed to put himself forward once again to stay on as chair. So if I could, if I could just look, if there is a... Do we need a proposer and a seconder for this role, or do we just go ahead and just vote on it? Do you want to leave them? No. Okay. Are we all content with that proposal? Yes, I think so. Good. Stuart also has failed to step back when asked for volunteers. So Deputy Chair Stuart, carrying on again. Do we have agreement on that? Yeah. Thank you for that. And Deputy Clinical Chair, and also in charge of speaker arrangements at board meetings, Trevor. Yep, done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. So now move on to item 9, which is the West Coast Integrated Care Partnership update. David, over to you. This is for discussion.
So as Nicola said, this is a paper that hopefully we can have a good discussion at the board after I present some of the initial plans and work that's taken place so far. The purpose of the report is to provide you with an update. Now, we haven't publicly discussed much in this space about the changes and the transformation that's taking place, but significant work by officers has begun behind the scenes, and we do need to consider how we begin to discuss this with staff within the CCG alongside with patients and public, so that we get an informed position and we're aware that actually in the beginnings we need something that we can engage people on rather than start from scratch and a place where there isn't any kind of structure. So all of the boards within West Hertfordshire have been meeting. We've met with the chief execs regularly. We've set up a kind of programme approach where lay members on the boards were asking directors in the system to come together and start to think about how you would begin to create and develop your integrated care partnership. There was an agreement that us as a CCG, alongside West Hospital Trust, took a leadership role in bringing that together, but weren't a lead provider, lead model in terms of that process. So this is about us, this is about the partnership. And when we talk about integrated care partnerships and integrated care systems, we need to think about us, we are it, alongside our colleagues and in other areas. We all know it's the move from competition to collaboration. And the 4 things that we needed to set ourselves were, what are our visions, aims and objectives and principles that we would be working towards. And we will be doing a session in more detail in the future of one of our other committees. But it was really important to start thinking in that terms, because actually you can get easily stuck into structure instead of talking about where you're going and what your functions are in terms of the system you need to deliver. And we all know that we need to deliver integrated health and care. So we began talking about how we would begin our vision and what that would look like. And we used the National Voices vision of integrated care, and we put that to all the chief executives of the system and lay members, and that's been something that's been adopted. The workshops around ICP have given us a bit more of a steer around how we start to unpack some of the work of what is the clinical commissioning group, this CCG, in terms of where we will place some of our functions. So we currently have a programme approach set up, and we have staff within the CCG leading that. And what we're doing is looking at functions that a CCG does. So it will do commissioning, it will do finance, it will do quality, it will do communications. And actually, where would that best sit, given that we're moving to one CCG at scale, but also we need skill sets to embed in our local integrated care partnership, because actually the skills of our workforce within the CCG could really benefit the local population, and lots of the providers don't do the skill sets or have the skill sets that we have as a CCG and built up over 5 years. So that's our journey, is to start thinking about how we delineate some of that work. Now, the next step is to kind of bring together alongside this the mental health integrated care partnership. And there has been some challenging conversations about whether there should be and could be a mental health integrated care partnership. And the system is currently settled for accepting that they will develop that alongside the geographical ones. So there will be 3 geographical ones: West Hertfordshire, East and North Hertfordshire and West Essex. Conversations continue about how do you then delineate care pathways, how do you make clarity of integration, and I know there are concerns clinically about how you get the best value by having a separate entity that you would have to transact with. And I think I share some of those concerns, but there is a space, I think, that's developing around specialist mental health and where that might have and need the right focus. Your areas like IAPT, your community teams need to be embedded, especially in supporting long-term conditions with our geographical physical health colleagues. And there's a piece of work we need to do to unpack that a bit more. What we also know is that we need to do organisational development across the system. This is a huge piece of work in terms of planning where we will do that and target that work. At the moment, chief execs have had lots of OD work, and actually you could probably argue that's not the place that you need to do your OD. If chief execs can't agree that integration is the best way forward, then we probably already have a problem, and what we should be doing is frontlining some of this OD to staff and middle managers as well, to ensure that they've got the value out of that work. And there's conversations about how we now begin to look at that as a system. And alongside that, staff engagement as well. This is huge. This isn't just CCG staff, this is all of our provider staff. So we're talking about thousands of people who need to think and consider different approaches to how they've delivered care in the future. And hopefully the system that we create around the back room will ensure that that's as easy as possible and not make their lives any more complicated. So they're kind of areas that we're developing. The programme will start to lift off in the next couple of weeks. We have a meeting tomorrow, Nicholas and I, with the chief execs and lay members of all of the providers to agree what would be a programme approach. They will be led by different SROs within each of the providers in the CCG. We'll be nominating those and putting it together as a plan. That will then lead us, and if everyone remembers, there was one side of A4 that Catherine originally did, which gave us a timeline, and that will lead us into where we think we need to go over the next year. It also has to parallel plan with our integrated care system, and I think there was acknowledgement at the last chief execs meeting across the STP that hadn't moved at the pace that it needed to move at, and actually ICPs were actually running at such a fast pace that this might put at risk some of the ICS skill sets that are needed into that system. So there is now an up to pace. We have a NHS process that we're going through that supports the system architecture. That's being led by a national team, and that'll be looking at areas around governance, around performance management, and how the new integrated care system will hold our local system to account in a term that you will hear locally called or nationally called system by default, which is about the system taking accountability for its performance, not the region, and then how we articulate how we're holding ourselves to account over such a large geography. And that will be the challenge that we need to incorporate into our integrated care system. So progress is being made. The detail we need to consider in terms of how we best approach our staff as a CCG. We're going through changes. We know that the senior management team will be going through changes, and we need to have that joined up approach to how we hold people through change, which is always unsettling and unnerving for individuals. But I think there is great opportunity here to get models right that have been kind of challenging in the past. So I think we just need to be considered in our thoughts. I'd just like to open it up for discussion. Just to note, there is a draft narrative, because we know how confusing this is, that Juliet has worked hard on, and you can see that in the appendix. And we want to make sure that we don't confuse people going from STP to ICS to ICP to everything else in terms of acronyms. So we try and be as clear in our language as possible. So open to debate.
Stuart,
So who is the narrative aimed at? Because it depends who it's aimed at. I found it not very informative in terms of what an ICP is. So who's the target audience for this narrative?
So this actually came out of there were some people around the table who went to a session organised across the STP to look at how we can start to describe, and it's mostly about how we describe this to the public. So what I wanted to do was just to put something down on paper that just started to, as a starter for 10, so this is going out to our PPI committee, I think later today, isn't it? Because we want to get some views from people. And, there is a debate about the extent to which people need to know some of the sort of structural things, what does it matter if organisations are working in partnership? We've been talking about that for absolutely yonks. But I think that the way that we viewed it is that actually there is something about being open and transparent on what's going on in the NHS. So if you don't want to go into detail with the public about what this means, and people might be shifting jobs or whatever, and the number of meetings we're having and all that, but actually there is something about people understanding that we are expecting, and the whole point of it is that it will have an impact on patient care, on the fact that we are There will be greater emphasis on people looking after themselves, that will prevent ill health, etc., and people taking more control. So it's this is a start for 10, just so that, because we actually have there's very little nationally. There are a couple of actually okay videos. Actually, NHS England's actually got a not bad video, but it's quite long. It's an animation. King's Place, similarly, King's Place, King's Fund, King's Place. It's a concert venue. But there is actually very little nationally that explains it in a way that people understand. So I think there will be different audiences, but actually we need to get the core bit broadly right. So this was a starting point, really.
I absolutely agree with that. But when I read that, I wasn't sure if it was targeted at people who have no understanding what an ICP is. It doesn't actually say what the ICP is and who the partners are.
Yeah, I mean, all feedback very welcome. I mean, I have to say, and I think I said this in a different forum, that when my first version of this, I sent to a few people, including my daughter. My daughter works in the NHS, and she messaged me and said, "Well, you haven't got a clue what you're talking about." So it was a real lesson for me. So I think this is, people who know something, I suppose, but all feedback very welcome, and it's work in progress.
Just had to be talked to another GP the other day, had no idea what an ICP was, because they're not involved.
No, absolutely. Indeed, exactly right.
Yeah. So I think, did you want to come back on that bit? Sorry.
Yes. For me, the whole point of all of this exercise is on integrated care is trying to achieve almost a one-stop shop for somebody when they've got a medical problem. A seamless system, whether it's going to community service or hospital. And the whole idea is to make, is to help, when people are sick, to help them get better quickly, or the other part is preventing them getting sick. And I think the starting point should be something about improvement in health, what it's trying to do, before it goes into ICP and ICS. I mean, even with my knowledge, this wouldn't give me enough information. But apart from that, there's a big issue about even the people who work in NHS don't actually understand. And I'll give you an example, which is a personal one. I'm supposed to be having a procedure, and the hospital phoned me and says, "We'll do it later." I said, "Okay, that's fine." And then I got a call from St Albans saying, "Do you still want this procedure?" And I said, "Well, hang on a minute. Have you heard of integrated care? Aren't you talking to each other?" For me, the change is something that you should feel and see, not read about it. You may not read anything about it, but if you're used in a facility or system, you see the change that has taken place, and it's an improved change. So I think, yes, we have to tell the public, but I think every person who works in the system that's going to be implementing the change needs to understand what it's all about, so that they can then deal with people appropriately.
I think there's loads of hands up, but I'm just going to take quick points in relation to that before I move on. Yeah, Elizabeth, quickly. Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's a difficult task to try and bottom this out, and I definitely think this is the start of 10. Some of the comments I had around the narrative was around, from a local perspective, we already did a bit of work on the narrative for local delivery groups, local delivery partnerships, etc. And I just think sometimes with narratives, especially integrated care, the King's Fund video I watched it last night, is the most generic video. It can apply in so many different ways. So integrated care as a concept, I think most people you can explain that. But when you call something an integrated care partnership or system, that means something. And I think because we've been on a journey locally, we probably just need to build on the journey we're on, have a transition period, and then maybe in a year's time we'll start with an ICP.
Okay. If it's a point on this point, yeah, Ravi? Yeah.
Can I just suggest that if we're taking a paper that we're trying to explain our line of travel, we need to start with our strategy rather than just the minutiae. So what is the strategy? The strategy is a joint-up system which is patient-centred, which has got a single door. You know, we have to be quite open-ended. And then I think the bit that doesn't come through this is how much buy-in there is further down. It details quite a lot of the physical health, mental health, and all the rest. Are we serious that it will deliver? Are we serious that we've got enough buy-in at all levels before we go out? Because that comes to Thelma's experience. Because if we're just using words rather than action, so what I'd like to do is to see a bit more of how it's going to happen rather than that it will happen.
Yeah, David?
I think you've got a good point. There's lots of more information, Rami, that isn't in this paper, and given that this is a paper for the public in a public meeting, we wanted to make sure that we had this conversation before we started loading it with lots of kind of delivery plans and details. The bit, if you remember in my report, is that the organisational development doesn't need to just happen at chief executive. It needs to happen, as Thelma said, at all levels, because actually people should be targeted with our own support as a system to ensure that they can and understand, you know, those what integrated care is. What we have recognised is we don't even have a clinical strategy or clinical and care strategy for our integrated care partnership, although we've agreed what our aspirational definition of integrated care is. So there's work and lots of work to do to make it feel like this is a total vision and total system. We've written Your Care, Your Future. We've written, you know, the STP, Healthier Futures strategy. Now we need to own our own local vision and what that means when we go into that space. All of that is for another meeting once we've agreed and signed off, and tomorrow's meeting with the chief execs and the lay members. We can be more public with this board and give you more information.
Okay, so Daniel, are these now points related to this question or different questions?
Moving on.
Right, not yet. So anybody, just on this point, yeah?
So on the point of how we tell the public and how we present the changes, in my experience of working with the public on a daily basis, one thing that tends to work very well is presenting clearly and but in summary of where we are now and where we're aiming to get. Showing clear difference between now and today and tomorrow. I don't know, just an idea of what you might help you.
Yeah, I think that's right. And that's and something which we're very clear about in terms of when we do go out to the public more in a more sort of structured way, is that actually videos are really helpful, and that's a really helpful way that we can say, you know, this is how, and it relates to your point as well, Thelma, this is kind of how patients experience it now, and this is what we expect in the future. And just that it's absolutely right, and I think those little snippet videos, and that's absolutely our plan. There's no way we would just send something out without people explaining that. I think the other thing about the King's Fund video, and it is worth looking at it, it's an animation, is that it describes what we're trying to do around integrated care. I don't think it's comprehensive enough, because it is only about, I mean, joined up care is key to all this, but there are other aspects of what we're trying to do that we also need to develop. So, you know, absolutely right, I completely agree.
So, any other comments on this specific issue? Okay, so I think what we've heard, I think Juliet, I think it's really fantastic that you've actually tried to create, you know, something, a narrative. It's so easy, isn't it, for us all to put our pennies worth in, which is exactly what we've just done now. But you have to start somewhere. So, and we felt this was really important to have the beginning of this conversation in public, because that's where it belongs. Okay, thank you. Right, so other points. Yeah, I think Azif was next, then it was Daniel, then it was Elizabeth, then it's Jill. Okay.
Thank you. I think it's the first time we are putting on a paper where we're talking about the fourth ICP here. Now, the confusion we just discussed about, this is primary care, general practice, everybody finding their feet and stare on each ICP. I think we will need a bit more help to primary care and PCNs to know they need to have a place and stare in all of those ICPs, the two that we will be actively taking part in, and where we fit in, because we've got a very short period of time where we'll be thinking. We just explain to our colleagues, it is geographically everybody working together, and now we are saying, now there's an extension. One person will be in two ICPs. How does that play out? Thank you.
A very good point, Asif. And I've been talking to some PCN clinical directors over the last week, and a conversation that's taken place tomorrow will be around governance. And we know that the anchor point for all of this work in reality is in the local delivery board, which will report into the Integrated Care Partnership Board. So no matter whether you're an ICP lead from a different part of the system, and the ICP is all of us, so let's not think of it as something separate that you interact with, but if you're going to get best benefit, it is us. The anchor point is the delivery board. Now, the conversation I've had with the clinical directors has been, where can we get a voice in the governance? And what's coming from clinical directors is that if they nominate one clinical director per locality, could they have a seat at the Integrated Care Partnership Board, which will be the decision-making part? So that's the one above the delivery board. So I propose to take that tomorrow for a conversation with the chief execs and LA members to say this would be a really good place to have a discussion. Now that means that you've got everybody around the table. And even in our ICP, we do have mental health representation. The bit that we don't want to do is create splitting where if I am interim chief exec in this role, I happen to be at one ICP meeting and then another. Conversation should take place in the most efficient way possible. So that's the challenge that we're facing. I think the bigger challenge in reality is the clinical pathway challenge and the reality of delivery models that might separate because of integrated care partnerships around mental health and what that might mean. But your challenge is there, and the answer hopefully will evolve tomorrow in conversations. Yeah.
Okay, I can see lots of hands up. Right, Daniel, Rami's.
Well, I think it's just an extension of Asif's point with, with the mental health ICP. You sort of alluded to some of the benefits of having, for example, the IAP services more closely sort of interlinked with general practice. So I'm just interested in what you feel the sort of 3 or 4 benefits of having a mental health ICP would be, and are there any sort of disadvantages to that?
So I think that the challenge is that So I think the challenge is, and Trevor and I have been sort of involved in some of this, is exactly the point. Right, is exactly the point that you make. But we've discussed at board many times the really poor outcomes that we have for those with severe mental illness, and there's also another strand which is the more specialist tiered services, which really are not just on an STP level, but are almost on a regional level. And I think that when we had our visit from Anne Bradmore on Tuesday, it was clear that that bit about connection to region and even thinking about developing a workforce that will be able to deliver that agenda, which is clearly going to be much bigger thread of the new government's policy agenda, is going to need that sort of higher level collective working together. What we've heard so far is an integrated care alliance, I would say, of mental health. So we are talking about Hertfordshire having an integrated care alliance for mental health and learning disability, and West Essex. And so I think that the bit that we've got to connect into is clinical pathways. So Trevor and I have been along to, if you like, the first sort of introductory meeting, and there's going to be other meetings that will happen. And we've just got to make sure that clinically, primary care is really part of the discussions. Now we do have, Mark Allen's successor, I've forgotten her name, sorry, I forget. Anna, of course, is going to be closely involved in that. And she's going to need to work very closely, I would suggest, with the clinical directors of the PCNs to make sure that everything's connected. It's a massive challenge, but I think there are 2 sides to this story, and we need to sort of find a way through. Yeah, sorry, Rami.
Can I just say that this is quite a concern, because the idea of an ICP is to remove the cliff edges. We're just creating another cliff edge, and we're creating a cliff edge of dog in the tail, and we're creating a cliff edge whereby we're talking about the very select at the top and forgetting the 95% at the bottom who are getting a really poor deal because they're being bounced around. And what I was hoping from ICPs is that we actually deal with the 95% and not bounce them. If you need to have a separate entity to deal with a very specialist at the top, that is fine, but that should not be the tail wagging the dog.
Okay. Yeah, Daniel?
Just a follow-up point on what you were saying, because as you were talking, I wondered whether that's sort of more strategic stuff to bring it all together is really the ICS, and that's a important mental health work stream of the integrated care system. Just wondered.
So I think there's multiple challenges here, aren't there? Because actually we jointly commission our mental health services as well, across partnership. We have a good arrangement with the council. We know that, in fact, the conversations have been, we know that most learning disability services are not health services. They're making sure that people live fulfilling lives in the community. Health will interface with those, so social care and community services that are built around them in terms of their lives. So where does learning disability sit? I think what we have agreed is that when you may have seen previously that there were two cohorts, specialist and community-based mental health services, that they will sit in terms of strategic alignment with the local geographical ICP. So that's the bit that we are striving to ensure is integrated in terms of Brandy's comments on. That's where your huge numbers are, that's where your significant IAP numbers are, and CBT, etc. But there is a specialist bit that we can't move away from, really, because it's being managed regionally anyway. And it's a regional kind of integrated care partnership of mental health trusts, and HPFT are leading on the basis that they're kind of lead commissioner in that space. So there are some nuances we need to work through, and it's not an easy challenge. If our county council colleagues were here, they would probably be saying they're asking similar questions on the basis of what that means for social care and what that means for the council and engaging across what's a Hertfordshire footprint. But they're the challenges we face.
I think it would also be fair to say that there is not, this is still discussion. With the appointment of a joint accountable officer and an ICS lead, I think that discussion will gather pace. But most of when we've actually had the discussions with HBFT, most of it has sat at that specialist end of the spectrum. And I found that quite reassuring. I don't know, Trevor, if you want to say anything on that.
I think Rami's point was well made, and I think we maybe, rather than having a completely separate mental health ICP, we should be working towards the majority of mental health that is that touches on large parts of the community being within our ICPs as they are. Maybe the small specialist stuff being done either at ICS level or they can have a separate ICP for that. But to be honest, we've been trying to emphasise how important joined up work is in the geographical ICPs, and I think I was quite surprised to see it sort of quite so fixed in writing that this is the current thinking, because I thought it was still in debate really.
Yeah, Karina, Elizabeth?
Just a quick point. A lot has improved when it comes to patient access to mental health services in the recent 1 to 2 years. But what it hasn't improved is access to specialist care. Okay? So that applies for camps, and that applies for general mental health services and people who really need it and need it quickly. Now, are we making this problem better by removing that very specialist care and put it into a different tier? Isn't this against the whole principle of bringing specialist care closer to home? This is the fundamental point, and we seem to be, by supporting the idea of an ICP, separate ICP, we are just ignoring this fundamental point that, the whole transformation is about bringing care closer, the specialist care closer to people at home and closer to the communities.
I don't disagree with anything that you said, and I think we've had those debates and I'll continue to have them. Just for clarity, in terms of the specialist regional work, that is inpatient beds. That's the brokerage to make sure you get your inpatient into the bed that's as local as possible. That's the bit that NHS England, who took on accountability for that for the last 3 years, were really struggling with. So but the SMI, serious mental illness, and others are being integrated, hopefully, in our geographical ICP, which is the work that we're planning to push forward on Karina, because I completely agree with your sentiments here.
Elizabeth?
Thank you. Just going back to, in terms of primary care transformation, the point Asif made initially, this paper was really good, but I think one of the things that we definitely need to start discussing is around the journey that primary care needs to go on. And whilst primary care networks will be the building blocks of what the ICP will be, But at scale, that 600,000 plus population in Herts Valleys, for example, that's not going to be networks of 30 to 50,000 at that table. And we need to think about primary care as a provider, even at its own. So you might have the trust as a provider, the community service as a provider, but at the moment you have individual practices, you have PCNs, you have federations, but actually is there a provider really for primary care at the moment? And I think we need to think about it. And the second side then is then the narrative and getting them onto that journey. I think we've got some work ahead.
So I think that's where the discussion about the clinical voice and the different strands of the clinical voice are going to need to be, that's the whole purpose of having that meeting, which, as I said, we will get in the diary as soon as possible. I think there was just one other theme that I think has been expressed around this table, which is that we still have a lot of work to do to sort of work with our clinical directors to get them to a point of an understanding of the system that we have now, so that then they can make the best decisions about the system for the future. And we're doing a lot of different strands of development work, but whatever you do will never be enough. And we've got to keep on that momentum of doing this, and that does take time, and that's, I think, what's good about some of the proposals to make sure that we enhance the support for clinical directors moving forward.
I think there's a huge opportunity here as well for primary care to get knitted into what are the current arrangements, and actually, and I don't want to use the word exploit, but it kind of feels like there could be an opportunity to really get in the conversations around enhanced services, development and growth, around areas of conversations that we've never had before with your secondary care colleagues. And when budgets get delegated for population cohorts, then there will be conversations about how best to deliver that, and that will come with a delivery model, business cases, and opportunities for primary care to think different and take key responsibilities in areas that the trusts previously may have decided to fund themselves. So I think there's conversations to go forward in terms of how we deliver this.
Dave, you are absolutely right, there is an opportunity, and you see it and I see it, but the question is not that. The question is there drive? Is there an interest? Is there a motivation to get involved? That's what we need to work on. Sorry.
Okay. Any other points before we work? Oh, sorry, Jill and Aziz. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Okay.
I just to raise in the paper there's a section which is 2.9 public involvement, and it talks about there being a workshop in January to talk about how there may be public involvement across the ICP, and that there could be some sort of integration there. Do we know that this workshop is taking place, or whether there'll be any opportunity to contribute to that, or hear from what happens?
So this is a workshop that we haven't yet got a date for. The date is almost finalised, I understand, and once it is, then we are all being asked to invite some patient rep service users. So it's either on the 28th of January or the 3rd of February, but we're not quite sure which day yet. 28th of January, no, 28th of February, I'm so sorry. Either the 28th of February or the 3rd of March. But when we have that date, we'll be coming out to get, because we do want patient reps at that session, it'll be really helpful.
Okay, Aziz.
Just one point about the fourth ICP, I'm sorry. I think as GPs here, all of us GPs, we do not differentiate between physical and mental health, and our patients are undifferentiated. So we need to be flexible to hear the other point of view, because just because we don't differentiate patients and we see them as one, not necessarily everybody else sees that. I know it's going against the tide, but we need to hear the arguments from the other side as well.
Yes. And I think that, as you make such a good point there, and I think that's what we're really trying to do, is to gain that understanding. But likewise, the mental health providers need to understand general practice even more. So it works both ways. So I think that's absolutely spot on.
And you can really only get that familiarity by working together rather than doing it away on the side.
Yeah.
And ultimately, it's all about health outcomes. And although we would like to think around this board that we have really tried very hard to improve the outcomes in terms of mental health, the facts are that we've still got a long way to go in order to really ensure that we get it right. So I think as you say, that's a very good place to start. Okay, unless there's any other points of that, I'm now intending to move on to the next agenda item. I'm not going to take a break at this point. So it's the finance report and outlook.
Thank you. Presenting the position at month 8, which is the period to the end of November. And we're continuing to report performance in the plan. We continue to report the same trend we've been reporting for the last few months, which is a slight underspend year to date, largely due to some allocations which have got expenditure planned against them but has not yet taken place. In terms of pressures within the system, or for us specifically as a CCG, we haven't got any risks that are not mitigated. And by that I mean what we anticipate to possibly happen around the cost of acute going up over the winter months, or prescribing costs we have fully covered through our budgets and contingency. So we're quite confident that we can finish the year on plan. Our CWIP continues to deliver just above 95%, which is also, of course, contributing to us being able to hold this position. So I've taken the report as read. I've got no exceptions to the report to the board. But if there are any questions,
yeah, Paul.
So I just wanted to pick up. Firstly, I think overall the sort of level of financial control and the assurance that we get that we're living within our means and all that sort of stuff is really, really encouraging. I just want to pick up the quick point though. I just feel that 95% is far, far better than we were achieving a few years ago, and I think that we have done a terrific job in embedding QUIP in the organisation. However, describing 95% achievement as marginally under plan, I think is we shouldn't be accepting that. I would like to be on a plane that got 95% of the way there. It's our target is 100%, and it's not just this year, it's our full year, it's next year. This is every time we underachieve on QUIP, then it flows into the forward years, there's more money to get back. Now we happen to be really flush with cash at the moment, really good, really handy, but the fact is we need to deliver on QUIP plans, and I don't think describing it as marginal. It's £800,000 or thereabouts. To me, I'd quite happily take that home. So I just think the mindset needs to be on QUIP that we really should be going for 100%. And although we all recognise the progress we've made, we should be sort of mildly disappointed that we haven't got 100%.
I think the first thing to say is we're not flush with money. However, we have been able to manage and mitigate that just on 5% shortfall. The reason really, the main reason why we have a shortfall is when we embarked on the QUIP planning last year, we had a number of non-elective schemes that were priced up as usual at full tariff. We then received planning guidance that actually didn't allow us to achieve that full price. The planning guidance that came out a year ago created a blended payment mechanism for emergency activity, and that meant any activity above the plan could only be charged or credited at 20% of tariff. So therefore that threw out some of our planning assumptions, and planning guidance was quite late to go out to work that through, and hence some of the underreporting is really due to the fact that we had anticipated or stated or planned higher savings than realistically we were able to achieve. Having said that, in terms of how planning works and how blended payment works, once you go into the next year, it was at full cost. So actually those savings, whatever has been achieved, does register the following year at full cost. It just doesn't register in year. And as part of our minimum income contract that we've agreed with West Herts, and anticipated changes in the way that contracting mechanisms may work, we have certainly as a team undertaken some quite detailed work to really understand how we price savings so that we can accurately reflect the impact of our transformation schemes and can do so in agreement with West Herts in particular. So we're quite confident that we're working into 2021 with a much clearer and quite different statement of savings. For this particular one, it says that it's really due to a late change in how emergency activity is being costed up.
So I'm just going to push back a little bit there, because I think that we saw the shortfall being forecast for quite a long time, and for a while we were being told that we were trying to work through new plans and to refill the fund and all that sort of stuff, which is the right thing to do. And I know that there is a really good process that keeps things ticking over. But my comment wasn't really about the mechanics of how we got to the 95%. I think we've had that explained to us before. My comment is really more around the culture and mindset that says we've marginally missed it. It's not marginal. We've missed it by nearly 5 percentage points, and we should all be thinking, no, 100% is what we're aiming for. That should be the objective. That's why we write it down as what we need.
Just to be assured, Paul, we continue to have, weekly, if not daily, conversations around projects that aren't delivering or should be delivering. Those continue into what we'll be planning for next year. I note your point around marginally disappointed, but I think the teams where their projects aren't succeeding would feel marginally disappointed as well in the work plans that they have. So we're encouraging them and working with them still on a weekly basis. There is no foot off the gas, it's just how we reported this in the board.
And it's really positive that we're having a discussion about shortfall of this size compared to a few years ago. So I didn't want to sort of leave it as a big negative. I just wanted to make the point that we have to deliver on this thing.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Stuart, Jill?
Can I just refer to the running costs slide here? We show actually that we are just about breaking even on total running costs, although we've got some significant variances in certain directorates, and yet we're forecasting everything will balance at the end of the year. Here we are at month 8, so not much time to do that. I suppose how we're going to do that, and also why do we have significant overspends, say, in the nursing department and commissioning. I'm sure there's good reasons, but...
The running cost budgets are reviewed in detail with each director. So each director is quite confident in their current delivery and how they're going to forecast. Yes, we should probably be rather more sensitive in our forecasting line by line. However, I'm completely confident that we will meet the forecast overall. It isn't always, it is something that we will make sure goes into the next board report, a more sensitive forecast modelling. But I'm confident I can assure the board that we are not looking at any risk of overspending against the line cost budget.
I just wonder if ones that are showing in red with black, we would show an underspend rather than just a break even, which is what we should try and achieve.
So I think we had a discussion about the interim arrangements for accountable officer and a commitment from the board to support beefing up behind both David and I. So if you look at where the overspends are, they are in our directorates, and we have kept some senior people in our teams to ensure that we can step up to what the CCG needs from us in terms of leadership.
Good, I was looking for that sort of
Can I just actually really echo that? It's about distributed leadership, and in order to ensure that that's done effectively, that does mean sort of strengthening parts of each of the teams that are affected by the people who have stepped into them. Jill?
Can I make a different kind of point, rather than about saving money, about spending money? And I noticed the reference here to how it's important to spend all the mental health money, because there's an expectation to do so. But, I mean, obviously these papers are in the public domain, and that in areas are in the black, so not as much money has been spent as perhaps could be, and that the public perceives some of those areas as being areas where things are not ideal or could be improved. I think that there is an argument about trying to make sure that the money is spent to make things as good as they can be.
So just in relation to that, I think especially around mental health, Commissioning Executive have scrutinised mental health business cases. to a real level of detail. The business cases have come back on a regular occasion to make sure that we get the right services in place. And I think it was a saying that Catherine had, it's harder to spend your money really well than it is to kind of make savings in terms of your plans. So colleagues who sit on the commission and exec will remember that we've gone through all of those business cases now. That means that once we've invested, we'll meet parity of Steve this year. So we will be meeting our statutory obligations in that space. But it is an important area, and I think we needed to make sure we got the plans right. And I think we had really good feedback clinically from colleagues at the Commission and Executive.
Okay, any other points from the board? Okay, I'm actually going to make a decision because I think people have voted their feet a bit. We're going to have a 5-minute quick comfort break, and then we'll reconvene at 10:50.
That's really good. He's a good scholarship. Yeah. So you've got a great place.
Oh, yeah, fine. I don't know Herts.
99% since we there's a number of processes in place to around and see if we can improve the current situation. So I'm not saying that's still the case. I'm saying let's see how that goes. And things like family upgrades.
Yes, we're going to go straight on.
No, we have 9 a year, and then we have to look at the questions. Well, that's new, but the conflicts are not going to. No, not the
There's quite a few days.
Yeah, it is. It clearly is. Sorry.
Yeah. This password is just
Who's in charge? Look, in charge. I think
Are you okay?
Yes, thank you. I've actually got them attached to my phone, so I don't know how to do Yeah, can you follow this one? Oh, okay. Small Q, capital W, lowercase L, one. You can manage that? Yeah. Capital V, capital R, capital C, capital C.
And you know you're dying, yeah? You know your battery is dying. Mine has died.
I've done it on balance. I've changed the settings. So
what do you have to do on balance?
I just press that, and I had it on high mode, so I put it on balance mode.
Oh, I need to do that. I didn't know that. I should do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that means that it basically uses less battery.
Yeah, or you can then
even lower it
down so it prolongs the battery life, but it changes dims the light and everything.
Oh, so just like a phone, okay.
Yeah.
Battery power. Oh, good, I need to do that. That's what I told you, it's a message. Yeah, I told them. I got there. Oh, I got there 8:30. I came this way and I'm like, okay, now I know where I am, my bearings are. It's Italian restaurant. So, yeah, so I went
You've got interacting as well. That's what you were right. That's why someone else and then you said
Right. Oh, so it is here.
Coming out of our, I just don't
Okay, can we start? I mean, we won't Okay, we're reconvening. Okay, can everybody take the seats, please? Okay, Juliet's actually. You're on next. Okay. So item 11. Yeah. Comms and engagement report. Do you want us all to stand?
Yes. So I'm taking the paper as read and really just want to draw attention to a couple of things. One of which is the NHS England assessment of our participation. People may remember that the assessment last year, we got improved ratings and we got good, and we got outstanding in a couple of the domains. We've been preparing for the next assessment. It's been done slightly differently in that they are focusing on the areas where where there was a shortfall when they assessed last time, essentially. And I think I said this before, and I think it's an important point that actually whilst the process can look a bit bureaucratic and there are some aspects of it that I think are flawed, some of the emphasis that I think isn't quite right. I actually think it is quite a good process because it has actually meant that we've looked at things, we've looked at good practice. So there were a series of webinars that we were involved in terms of hearing other people's good practice. We actually were asked by NHS England to share our own good practice, particularly around the reader panel. So I think it's been a reasonable process. So that our submission goes in next week, and David has seen it and approved it. The Chief Exec has to authorise the submission, and then so we wait the next assessment, and we should get the outcome of that. They do take quite a long time, but it'll probably be early summer. The other thing I wanted to mention was about the session that was held early this week, where we invited all the people who have been involved in our work, whether on procurement working groups, PPI committee, service redesign, to talk to us about what it was like for them, because we do actually always want to kind of improve what we're doing and get some feedback about kind of how it was working. We have a view as members of staff involved in those groups, but actually to see how it was for the patient reps themselves. And actually it was a very good session. I think there are lots of very positive views expressed about people feeling valued, and I think that was a really, really good thing, that people actually feel that their contributions are valued, that they didn't find the environments they were walking into intimidating, which I think is also really important because that can be incredibly off-putting. That mostly people felt they were thanked for their work, but that was also an area that people sometimes picked up as something which we need to do better, make sure that we always thank people for their contributions. These people are volunteers, they give their time freely. So there are a number of sort of outcomes from that session that we're going to be working on. And one of the things which I thought was interesting, and I've thought about this for some time, is the term patient rep, and there was a suggestion that isn't a good rep, isn't a good term, and I really don't like it. So I think the word volunteer is a good one. I mean, you know, we haven't settled on it across the room with Jill. But I just think we need to perhaps think about some of the terminology we use. I thought that was quite an interesting comment. So it was really good, and there will be some changes, and we will thank all the people who came along, and we'll tell them what we've done as a result. Just actually, I also want to mention, probably in the context of the NHS assessment, is our participation strategy, which we have just updated. It's gone to PPI committee. It isn't a full-blown review. We actually did a review less than 18 months ago now, but we wanted to update it partly because of the changes, some of the changes in emphasis because of the NHS assessment, particularly around us doing more work around feeding back to volunteers, stroke patient reps, and evaluating the contribution they've made. That will come to the board next time. I think it's quite important that everybody gets an airing there. The only other thing that I thought I'd just draw your attention to is the launch of the Weightless app. And if you haven't already got it on your phones, please do. It's called, I know when I talk about this, some people think I'm talking about losing weight. It's not. It's because I think people here will know that it's about waiting less time when you go to for urgent care. So it's designed to help the public have some information about when they've got a minor injury. They can have a look at the app, and it tells them roughly the current waiting time in various centres. The message is still, so we're doing some comms around this, and the message is still, this is really important, that use NHS 111, because actually I think the Weightless app isn't necessarily going to help us in terms of people going to the right place for their condition, because maybe, and I look at it frequently, it may be that sometimes Watford General will come up as the shortest wait time, and actually, So anyway, I think some people here know that I've had some misgivings about the app, but it is going live. It could be useful, but the message is still to the public. First, your first port of call should be NHS 111. Okay. I think that's it from me.
Right.
Comments, questions?
Daniel, Rami, Stuart?
Well, I just want to be a little optimistic about the Weightless app. I mean, I think people might just self-regulate, and in an ideal world, it might just help smooth the system out. I mean, I think it could be, if it works well, something like this. We'll see.
Okay, Rami?
There's a button that says call 999
Can I just question also what happens once Greenbrook come in and the waiting times are reduced? Does that mean they all just come to Greenbrook?
So we had a conversation at the Urgent Treatment Centre Mobilisation meeting, which I've just come from. At the moment, that service isn't on waitlist, but obviously it will have to be come the 1st of April. So people may, I share some of Julia's reservations, but ultimately the Urgent Treatment Centre roles include both seeing people who are sick and need to go into hospital, seeing people who can be managed in the Urgent Treatment Centre, and redirection. And the service requirements include redirection. So, yeah, it is what it is. They are as well equipped as anyone can be to deal with that appropriately.
Right, I think it was Stuart next. Yep.
I might have missed it before, but can you just tell me briefly how the PPG incentive scheme works, what it's all about? Have we had that beforehand?
It's certainly been mentioned in my reports in previous board meetings. This has been it's been in preparation. It's been in preparation for some time. Excuse me. This was about us putting together some guidance and some standards in terms of what we were expecting from PPGs, because we have some really high performing PPGs and some that were doing less well, and we really wanted to I suppose share the good practice and give an incentive for those practices that didn't have such high performing or such well developed PPGs a chance to do that. So that it goes live in August. Not in August, April. I keep on getting my dates and months muddled up. So that's the principle. It's about improving participation groups to the highest level.
Okay, can I just ask for a copy of that, because I would like to know what the detail is and what.
Okay. Yeah. Back to Daniel.
So I was just going to ask another question about the workplace app. I mean, we have done quite a lot in Herts Valleys on improving access to primary care. And I wonder if the makers of the app would be interested in working with us to sort of highlight where the primary care capacity does exist.
Sorry. So one of the conversations we've had with the suppliers of the app, and remember it's a national app, and that's part of our problem, is that we can't do anything that's bespoke to us. Because wherever you are in the country, you click on the app and it gives you the information for the area. But the principles are the same. So one of the things which we wanted to do was to put, for example, pharmacy information on there. Because actually, otherwise, again, the message is quite narrow. So I think there is some scope for that, but at the moment, that's all we
want to evolve.
Exactly. I think so.
I wonder if they want to work with us to help.
Yeah, I mean they might do. We've got the license we've got for this. So it's a pilot and it's running until I think October. So that's the point at which you're up to then we can start to think about how we might develop it. So it's more useful, because at the moment it's very narrow.
Okay, can we just focus the questions right? I think Richard was next. Karina?
I'm not...
Juliet.
I'm not sure how it will actually work down, because whereas patients have a choice about whether they attend MIU or the ETC in Henry or go to Watford, if they're registered with one practice, and therefore I can't see how they can choose between different primary care offerings. Or am I getting the wrong end of the stick? I think logistically, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Karina?
Yeah, just very quick. Sorry, just very quickly, Juliet, because you started with saying that this is a minor point, perhaps. I don't know why people are talking about losing weight when I'm talking about the weightless app. So that's to emphasize the point of branding. So if at all you have any influence or able to make any suggestion, perhaps you should start with what's it called and what is it about? Because if weightless app, weightless app makes you think of losing weight, perhaps you should come up with a better name.
Okay, very good point. Okay, any other points on that? Okay, thank you very much, Juliet. That was obviously for discussion. So over to Paul for the Audit Committee report. I'll take that as read and over to you.
So just a few points I want to highlight. Conflicts of interest, a continuing area of discussion in the Audit Committee, and one that will become increasingly challenging, if that's possible, as the sort of NHS structures evolve still further. So one of the things that we said we would try to do is to give a simple but not exhaustive list of things that actually represented conflicts of interest that we could disseminate more widely to the practices, which I think Rob was going to have a shot at, and Randy was going to do a sense check on for us as our sort of friendly GP on the Audit Committee, to see that it might actually give some guidance, not removing the need for common sense, but giving some guidance on the sorts of things that really did constitute conflicts of interest. The other things I just wanted to talk about, external audit plan is working towards getting the accounts signed off on 28th May. Nothing really substantial there to concern ourselves with. Internal audit, we had 4 audits come back, one of which came back as a green substantial, which is really good. The other 3 came back as reasonable, which are all positive opinions. There was only one high priority action, and that was actually completed by the time of the committee, which is very much the sort of thing we like to see and shows management being very responsive and getting on top of things quickly. We discussed two risks off the bat, one on public engagement and we also have an update on ACS mobilisation. On the public engagement risk, and I think, Juliet talked a bit about the NHSE stuff in the last agenda item, and I think one of the things we sort of struggle with the annual report of the audit committee is the need to keep it streamlined to the extent that it can be audited easily, we can make sure that everything hangs together and the auditors can verify the stuff that's in there, and the need to properly reflect the work that the CCG does. And good luck with the challenge of balancing that, sort of circling that square as it goes on. In terms of the ACS mobilisation, I think the committee were pretty assured that things had been handled really well. And I think the real challenge here is to make sure that we take things forward and repeat the process, because I think David said in the meeting that one of the lessons learned was that we actually put the right level of resource on it, which is sometimes easier said than done on these things. We had a bit of a discussion about sort of provider plans that were based on recruitment, because healthcare professionals are, not surprisingly, in short supply everywhere. So anyone who says they're going to magically solve it, we should always perhaps build our own optimism bias into. And we need to recognise that outgoing providers are not always as competent as they might be, and that we need to factor that in realistically into our plans as well. Those are the highlights of the audit committee. I don't think there's anything else that I wanted to bring to anyone's attention, but I'm happy to take any questions.
So can I just clarify, Paul, in light of the stuff you said about BAF, has that been addressed in the discussion that we've had about BAF earlier on at board, or is there anything in addition we just need to make a note of?
No, nothing new.
No. Okay. Questions? Yeah, Rod and
Trevor. Sorry, wasn't a question. I definitely don't think I am. A number of board members are outstanding on their conflicts of interest training.
That's with a small O as well, isn't it?
Indeed. So could I just, I'll send out a reminder so you all know. But just to say also that at the next board development, which is next month, we'll cover off the information governance. So if you are outstanding on that, there's no need to do it online, we'll cover it.
Oh, okay, that's cool. Just, I think I'm pretty confident I'm up to date on that, because I've done the new module. It's remarkably similar to the old one, but it just has to be completed again.
You're leading from by example.
Yeah, exactly. Trevor?
Just checking you're happy with 95% on the external audit.
Sorry, what was the 95%?
19 out of 20.
Sorry?
19 out of 20.
Sorry, I've lost I haven't got the paper in front of me.
Just the paragraph above the recommendation.
He's winding you up.
Okay, that's actually relative to a year, Trevor.
It's Trevor's way of recognising your achievement.
Yeah, so just to be clear, for those that don't actually understand all this stuff at all, each year we do an external audit, and it's a financial year that covers 2 years. So it runs from April to March the following year. So this runs from April the 1st, 2019 to March the 31st, 2020. I hope that's helped.
30 all. Touche. Okay. Okay, any other points? No? Okay, thank you very much, Paul. That's obviously for assurance. In terms of the committee meetings, I am going to take them all as read, and I'm just going to invite any of those that are here, if there's any particular points that you want to highlight from the report. So if I can start with Diane, in terms of quality and also performance, is there anything you want to add?
Just a very brief point in terms of, we mentioned it at the board previously that we were reducing the performance and the quality committees down to bi-monthly. And so we've put that in place now, and we've realigned the work plans so that everything is going every other month to those committees. And I just wanted to reiterate that means obviously we won't see a performance report at every board meeting, so you'll note there is no performance report today. Performance committee is next week. So the commitment, I guess, is that if there are key issues, we will still raise them to the board, either immediately as they happen if they're very concerning, or at board meetings. But I just wanted to reiterate that in case everybody thought we'd forgotten.
Yeah, Stuart?
Can I just say, I was with Claire yesterday when we were doing the complaints review at West Herts Trust, and we talked about the quality report every month. And the real positive comment from her was it's now gives space and time to have proper discussions rather than finish one quality paper and then have to move directly on to producing one every month. So it's been a real plus and a real benefit, which is how I saw it right from the outset. And so it was good to hear that from Claire, that she now has a week of quality discussions. Very positive stuff.
Okay, very helpful. Can I just ask Rod, in terms of audit committee and patient public involvement, is there anything else to add that we haven't already covered?
No, I think what Paul's obviously done patient report. Alison's not here, but I think Juliet has covered off some of the key points we discussed at PPI.
Okay, thank you. Elka, in terms of what we've already talked about?
No, it's just to encourage some response to that. We do produce a finance report each month, so there may be occasions where the report goes directly to board because the finance committee didn't take place in that month. I think the other thing to note around the frequency of the finance committees and payments going to meetings, this also means that the planning submission will come directly to board because there's been a delay in the guidance being issued. So our submission is first submission is moved to early March because we haven't got the frequency of the finance committee. We will occasionally present papers directly.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think if there's anything significant, clearly they can go out of committee to finance committee members, so I would rule that out as a thing. Just because there's no meeting, we can always send it around anyway in advance of the board if it's helpful.
Okay, David, in terms of commissioning exec?
Only to note that while I'm in role as interim CEO, Abni Shah will be lead officer for commissioning executive in her role as interim director of commissioning.
Yeah, Trevor, did you want to come back?
Just think on to note on comment there is just how much mental health there was on there.
Yes. Very good point.
Is part of the ICP.
Rally?
So just something that's not on there but would be important for ComExec. I think we need to also link with other agencies, particularly HCC, when they make decisions that affect primary care and particularly affect safety in primary care. How do we make sure that that comes to ComExec? I can share an event out of the meeting to do with safeguarding, which has suddenly raised its head yesterday, which could have affected all GPs. And it was sent literally as an email to say, please distribute to GPs, and missing the CCG completely.
Okay, and then Michelle, are you going to just anything you wish to add in terms of primary care commissioning committee?
So I just want to note that one of the items that was discussed in December around the safeguarding payment options for GPs providing reports. Following that committee meeting, we got direction from the region that we were to suspend any activity with regards to commissioning a process until the region had worked out something they wanted to implement consistently across the patch. And then yesterday we were notified by David that actually the region has now instructed CCGs to continue their work in implementing the processes. So just want the board to note that we have a process that's been agreed by our commissioning committee and by the other CCGs across the STP, and we'll be communicating out to GP practices around that new process and the payment arrangements.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other points generally on all of those? I think I've covered everything. Okay, so item 14, reflection on quality and diversity in relation to the decisions. I was just checking that there isn't anything that I don't think anything's come up today that has been particular importance in that respect. Risks identified. Yeah. Anything that you picked up from our discussion? Might need to speak to this microphone.
One was around the Brexit risk.
Yeah.
And just make sure that that's not lost.
And yeah, that's a reframing of it, isn't it, rather than actually that it, yeah. And I think the other one, which I would echo, is actually Rami's point about, you know, decisions, funding decisions across what will be our ICP and how that affects not only primary care but actually all providers is something that we're increasingly going to have to raise. So I think it's there within our BAF, but it just needs to be highlighted. Anything else and anything else? Yeah, sorry, Elizabeth.
And it's highlighted already, but I think the PCN does an impact on that.
Yes.
Should the changes not come through as we expect?
Yeah. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to say that that's the end of our meeting. Date and time of next meeting, well, not time, but are we starting at 9 next month? 26th of March, and I don't think we've been there before. It's St Albans Chambers Room. Right, so there we are. So Downing on Richard will be happy. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, can I just suggest that maybe we don't, I'm thinking about members of the public, and whether we could, we don't usually start at 9, and I just think in terms of facilitating members of the public coming along to the public board meeting, I'm not sure that 9 o'clock would be quite the right time.
I suppose that's something we can perhaps have a discussion outside, Julia. I think whatever time we choose will never be the right time, but I think that it is, I mean, we used to start in the afternoon. That was cut out one demographic, we've got another. So should we take that outside and have a discussion? Because I think maybe a variety is important as well.
Yeah, maybe that's right.
Okay, thank you very much. That's the close of the meeting. Okay, so are we going to turn the camera off at this point? Yeah.
You actually put it on yet?
No, I think I'm just pretending to.
It's not what we did.